Hello, my dear students. Today, we will be having a new lesson in assessment in learning. In particular, we have here lesson 3, which is alignment of assessment with learning objectives and learning outcomes. Now, let me give you the learning objectives of this lesson. At the end of this lesson, you are expected to first, determine the difference and connection between learning outcomes and learning objectives, and second, apply Bloom's taxonomy of learning in setting learning objectives with greater emphasis on higher order thinking skills. As teachers, we use learning outcomes and learning objectives as basis of our assessment. Actually, teachers on many occasions use learning outcomes and learning objectives interchangeably. But how are they similar? As you can see in this figure, learning outcomes describe the measurable skills, abilities, values, or knowledge that students should be able to demonstrate as a result of a particular class, course, or program. In addition, they are student-centered rather than teacher-centered, meaning they describe what the students will do and not what the instructor will teach. Similarly, learning objectives tell what the learner should be able to do when they have completed a segment of instruction. As you can see, both are directional and serve as guides and indicators that teachers and students must achieve knowledge, skills, and attitudes, or KSA, as evidence of a successful teaching and learning process. Now the question is, how are they different? Learning outcomes are statements of what a student will be able to do or demonstrate at the completion of a certain sequence of learning, say after a certain course or a program. They are mainly concerned with the achievements of the learner and less with the intentions of the teacher. Learning outcomes also inform students of what is expected of them in terms of performance to achieve desired grades or credits. On the other hand, learning objectives refer to teachers' intentions for learners, such as what subjects will be taught during the course or program. And it is important to note that learning objectives reflect what teachers do. As you can see, learning outcomes are student-centered. On the other hand, learning objectives is more of an expression of the teacher's intentions for his or her learners. How learning outcomes and learning objectives related? Well, learning objectives are used to organize specific topics or individual learning activities to achieve the overall learning outcome. And how learning outcomes and learning objectives connected to assessment? Well, as you can see, both learning objectives and learning outcomes must match with appropriate modes of assessment. Hence, learning objectives or learning outcomes are basis for assessment. Our next question is, if learning objectives or outcomes are basis for assessment, then how are learning objectives or outcomes formed? Well, as practiced, we teachers use Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives as framework for setting learning objectives and learning outcomes. There are actually 6 classifications of learning, both from the old and revised Bloom's taxonomy or Bloom's framework. While the original was proposed by Bloom, the revised one was proposed by Anderson and Krathwohl. The frameworks also show that classifications of learning are divided into lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills. Now what you can see is figure 1, Bloom's taxonomy of learning. In the first figure is actually the old framework, while the second figure in 2001, obviously that's the revised one. Knowledge and comprehension, or remember and understand, are considered lots. On the other hand, those on the top are considered HOTs. So while it is important to use lots in determining learning objectives because of their foundational in nature, HOTs should also be used because it promotes cognitive learning or higher cognitive learning. And take note also of the revisions made by Anderson and Krathwohl. For one, from nouns such as knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, the revised one used the verb form, such as remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. As you can see, remember is the counterpart of knowledge, understand is the counterpart of comprehension, apply for application, analyze for analysis, evaluate for evaluation, and create for synthesis. Notice also of the positions of the top two taxonomy or classifications of learning, evaluation and evaluate, and synthesis or create have interchanged. So in the old model, evaluation was the highest, but in the revised one, the highest this time is create. This one is the revised Bloom's taxonomy used in flipped classroom or flipped learning. Flipped learning is a pedagogical model where traditional instructional goals for what happens inside and outside of the class are reversed or flipped, and student learning becomes increasingly active. The goal of a flipped design is to move the student's initial exposure to course content outside of the classroom so that in-class meetings can be used for direct student engagement with the instructor, with each other, and with the course content. In the traditional model, we normally do activities or class activities that pertains to remembering and understanding, such as lectures, presentations. And then we give activities that pertain to application, analysis, evaluating, and creating outside of the classroom as an assignment, homework, or project. But in flipped classroom, we give in advance the lessons so that they can already process remembering and understanding. And then, when they go to the classroom, we give them activities where they can do application, analysis, evaluation, and creating. Here is a table of verbs in Bloom's taxonomy of learning or Bloom's revised taxonomy of learning that is proposed by Anderson and Krathwohl. So the verbs can be used in setting learning objectives, hence serve as basis when we assess student learning. Let's start with remembering. In remembering, students exhibit memory of previously learned material by recalling facts, terms, basic concepts, and answers. The verbs that we may use are the following: choose, define, find, label, list, match, name, omit, recall, relate, select, show, spell, and tell. In understanding, students demonstrate understanding of facts and ideas by organizing, comparing, translating, interpreting, giving descriptions, and stating main ideas. The verbs are classify, compare, contrast, demonstrate, explain, illustrate, infer, interpret, outline, relate, rephrase, show, summarize, translate. In applying, students are able to solve problems to new situations by applying required knowledge, facts, techniques, and rules in a different way. Sample verbs that you can use in setting your objectives are apply, build, choose, construct, demonstrate, experiment with, make use of, model, organize, plan, select, solve, and utilize. In analyzing, students examine and break information into parts by identifying motives or causes. Students are able to make inference and find evidence to support generalizations. Sample verbs are analyze, assume, categorize, classify, compare, contrast, conclude, discover, dissect, distinguish, examine, infer, inspect, and simplify. Now, in evaluating, students are able to present and defend opinions by making judgments about information, validity of ideas, or quality of work based on a set of criteria. So in setting your objectives, you may use agree, appraise, assess, award, choose, compare, conclude, criticize, decide, deduct, defend, evaluate, judge, prove, recommend. And lastly, and the topmost, creating, where students compile information together in a different way by combining elements in a new pattern or proposing alternative solutions. Here, sample verbs are adopt, build, change, combine, compile, compose, construct, create, design, develop, formulate, improve, invent, make up, maximize, minimize, modify, originate, plan, propose, solve, test, and theorize. In this slide is a mind map developed by Churches in 2007. It shows the verbs in Bloom's revised taxonomy that can be used in setting learning objectives inclusive of digital technologies and digital cognitive objectives. Now let's start with remembering. Aside from the usual verbs, we can add bullet pointing, highlighting, bookmarking, social networking, social bookmarking, favoriting, local bookmarking, searching, and Googling. In understanding, we may add advanced searches, Boolean searches, blog journaling, twittering, categorizing, commenting, annotating, and subscribing. In applying, we can add running, loading, playing, operating, hacking, uploading, sharing, and editing. While in analyzing, we can add mashing, linking, tagging, validating, reverse engineering, and cracking. In evaluating, we may consider blog or vlog commenting, reviewing, posting, moderating, collaborating, networking, refactoring, alpha and beta testing. And finally, in creating, we may require students to do programming, filming, animating, blogging, video blogging, mixing, remixing, wikiing, publishing, video casting, podcasting, and directing or producing. Okay, so that's it. That is our lesson about aligning learning objectives and learning outcomes with assessment. Of course, with a greater emphasis on Bloom's taxonomy of learning. Thank you.